Single mom abandoned by her own father, rescued by a millionaire who secretly loved her for 10 years. Hi, my beautiful family. It's your Mr. Peter. Before the story begins, please let me offer a quiet prayer, one that I hope wraps around you like a warm blanket. May love find you today in the smallest, most unexpected ways. May your heart feel light, your spirit feel safe, and your soul know it's deeply cared for. May every heavy thought be replaced by gentle peace, and may the road ahead surprise you with kindness, healing, and joy. I pray that even if the world feels loud and cold, you always carry the warmth of knowing this. You matter, you are loved, and you are never alone. Now, my sweet family, this story is a special one. Though I'm not speaking today, every word still came from my heart. And James, my dear brother, will bring it to life for you. But can I ask you something softly? Are you getting tired of these introductions? I only speak like this because I care, and I want you to feel seen before the story even begins. To my beautiful friends joining for the first time, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. Please stay. Let the story unfold. Give James just one chance. Listen with an open heart. And if it doesn't feel right to you, you can tell me with love. I'll always listen. But today I need something small and sacred. Please keep me in your prayers. Not long, not loud, just one quiet moment between you and heaven. And if you can, please stay through the whole story. Not because you have to, but because I made this for you, from the deepest part of me. Like the video. Leave a soft word in the comments. Let me feel your love tonight, wherever you are. Now take a breath, let your heart be still, and let James begin the story. A story written in love and meant just for you.
The eviction notice shook in Slanda Peter's hands, its red lettering stark against white paper, made wet by her tears. 28 years old, 3 jobs, and still drowning. It was never enough. Behind her, 6-year-old Amelia hummed softly while coloring butterflies at their kitchen table, unaware that their world was crumbling again. "Mama, why are you crying?" Amelia's sweet voice cut through the silence. Slanda quickly wiped her tears and forced a smile. "Just happy tears, baby girl. Mama's just tired." The lie tasted bitter, but what else could she say? That her father, Adam Bailey, had abandoned them 10 years ago. That her mother had died 2 years ago, leaving Slanda to face the world alone. That, despite working as a night shift cleaner, weekend catering assistant, and morning coffee shop server, she still couldn't keep a roof over their heads. "We're gonna be okay, right, Mama?" Amelia asked, her dark eyes filled with trust. "Always, sweetheart." Another lie that felt more like a prayer. The community center was Slanda's sanctuary. Every Tuesday and Thursday evening, after her shift at Murphy's Coffee and before her night cleaning job, she volunteered here. It was unpaid work she couldn't afford to do, but somehow couldn't afford not to do. These elderly residents had become her chosen family. "There's our sunshine girl," called Mrs. Patterson, an 87-year-old former teacher whose silver hair had grown thin. Slanda had been coming here for 3 years, and Mrs. Patterson never failed to greet her like she was the best part of her day. "How are you feeling today, Mrs. P?" Slanda asked, settling beside the elderly woman's wheelchair. Her own exhaustion melted away as she focused on others. It was easier than facing her own problems. "Better now that you're here, child. Would you help me with my hair? These old hands can't manage a proper braid anymore." Slanda's heart warmed as she gently worked her fingers through Mrs. Patterson's silver strands. As she braided, she hummed softly, the same lullaby her mother used to sing, the one she now sang to Amelia every night. "You have the voice of an angel," Mrs. Patterson whispered. "Reminds me of my daughter." Mrs. Patterson's daughter had died 15 years ago, a grief still visible in the elderly woman's eyes. "Tell me about her," Slanda said softly. And Mrs. Patterson did, sharing stories that made them both laugh and cry. Slanda listened completely, remembering every detail each resident shared. Mr. Jameson liked his tea with 2 sugar cubes. Mrs. Rodriguez preferred sitting by the window to watch birds. Mr. Chen always asked about Amelia, and Slanda never failed to show him new pictures. What Slanda didn't know was that across the room, partially hidden behind a pillar, Jason Cloward stood frozen, watching her with the intensity of someone witnessing something extraordinary. He had come to discuss a donation with the director, but the meeting was postponed. He should have left, but someone had captured his attention. Jason was 32, worth more money than most people could imagine, and had never believed in love at first sight. Until this moment. Until he saw Slanda Peter gently braiding an elderly woman's hair while humming a melody that seemed to wrap around his heart. She was beautiful, but it wasn't her physical beauty that stopped his world. It was how she truly listened to Mrs. Patterson's stories. How she remembered exactly how Mr. Chen liked his tea. How she moved through the room like sunlight, bringing warmth to people the world had forgotten. She was kindness in human form, everything he had never known he was searching for. Jason watched as Slanda finished the braid and carefully helped Mrs. Patterson to the dining area, making sure she was comfortable before moving to the next person who needed attention. She never rushed, never seemed impatient, never acted like her time was too precious for these elderly souls who lit up at her presence. "She's special, isn't she?" Jason startled, turning to find Martha, the center's director, standing beside him with a knowing smile. "I'm sorry, I was just watching our Slanda work her magic," Martha finished with a gentle laugh. "Don't apologize. Everyone falls a little in love with her. She's been volunteering here for 3 years, never misses a day unless her daughter is sick. Works 3 jobs and still finds time to brighten these folks' days." 3 jobs? Jason's voice came out rougher than intended. "Single mother, been on her own since her girl was little. Toughest person I know, but she'd give you the shirt off her back if you needed it. Last week she used her grocery money to buy Mr. Jameson a birthday cake. Ate peanut butter sandwiches for dinner all week, just to see that old man smile." Jason's chest tightened. He wanted to ask more questions, but Slanda was moving toward their section, and he found himself stepping back into the shadows, not ready to intrude on something so pure. "Mrs. Rodriguez, how are you feeling today?" Slanda's voice was like honey and hope, and Jason felt his hands shake as he listened to her chat with the elderly woman in flawless Spanish, switching languages effortlessly as she helped adjust the woman's shawl. When Slanda laughed at something Mrs. Rodriguez said, the sound hit Jason like lightning. Rich and genuine, it was the most beautiful sound he'd ever heard. He found himself leaning forward, desperate to hear it again. For another hour, Jason stood transfixed, watching Slanda move through the room like an angel unaware of her wings. She helped residents with evening medications, read letters to those whose eyes were too weak, played gentle music, and danced with those who were able. Every gesture was filled with genuine love. When visiting hours ended and Slanda began gathering her things, Jason finally forced himself to move. He slipped out through the back entrance, his heart pounding. In his car, he sat for long minutes, staring at the community center, unable to drive away. That night, Jason couldn't sleep. He lay in his massive empty mansion, staring at the ceiling, unable to stop thinking about Slanda. He had never felt anything like this overwhelming need to know everything about her, to protect her, to somehow become worthy of existing in the same world as someone so genuinely good. At 3 in the morning, he did something unprecedented. He pulled out a leather journal and began to write. "Today I met an angel who doesn't know she has wings. She has brown eyes like warm honey and hands made for gentle things. She braids old women's hair and remembers everyone's favorite tea. She speaks Spanish and kindness in the same breath. She works 3 jobs and still volunteers her time. She is everything beautiful about humanity in one person, and I will spend however long it takes trying to become worthy of knowing her name." Jason closed the journal and held it against his chest, already knowing this was the beginning of something that would change his life forever. Tomorrow, he would find out everything he could about Slanda Peter. Not to intrude or stalk, but to understand how he might help her without her knowing. Because already, after just one evening of watching her love others, Jason Cloward was completely, helplessly, irrevocably in love with a woman who didn't even know he existed. And somehow, that felt exactly right. Chapter 2. The Guardian Angel. The rent notice was gone. Slanda stared at her kitchen table where the eviction warning had been yesterday, her heart racing. She searched frantically through bills and school papers, but the red-lettered threat had vanished. In its place was a crisp white envelope with her name in elegant script. With shaking fingers, she opened it. "Your rent has been paid through the end of the year. You deserve a chance to breathe. A friend." Slanda collapsed into her chair as tears began to fall. 6 months of rent. 6 months where she wouldn't have to choose between shelter and food. "Mama, why are you crying again?" Amelia appeared in her butterfly pajamas, hair tousled from sleep. "Happy tears, baby girl," Slanda managed, pulling her daughter close. 3 blocks away, Jason sat in his car outside Murphy's Coffee, watching through the window as Slanda wiped down tables with renewed energy. He had spent weeks learning her routines, not to intrude, but to understand how he could help the woman he'd fallen in love with at first sight. Jason had paid her rent through anonymous cashier's checks, but now came the harder part, helping without being discovered. Slanda was proud. He'd seen it in her determination to handle everything alone. She wouldn't accept charity, so he had to be invisible in his care. His phone buzzed. "Package delivered to car. Security confirms she's alone." Jason smiled, anticipation building. 4 weeks since he'd first seen her. 4 weeks of falling deeper in love with a woman who didn't know his name. He'd learned her favorite flowers were sunflowers, her coffee order was a medium vanilla latte with extra shot, and that her daughter Amelia was obsessed with butterflies. He watched as Slanda finished her shift and walked to her beat-up Honda Civic. As she approached, Jason held his breath. There, tucked under her windshield wiper, was a single perfect sunflower with a small card. "Someone believes in your sunshine." From his vantage point, Jason watched Slanda's face transform. She picked up the flower with reverent hands, read the note, and looked around the empty parking lot with wonder. When she pressed the sunflower to her nose and smiled, actually smiled, Jason felt like he could conquer the world. The coffee shop arrangement had taken careful planning. Jason approached Tommy, the teenage barista, with a proposition. "I want to set up a customer appreciation program," Jason explained, sliding cash across the counter. "Every morning, have her drink ready when she arrives. Medium vanilla latte, extra shot, no foam. Tell her she's been selected for complimentary drinks. That's like a lot of cash. For coffee? For making someone's morning better," Jason corrected. Now, weeks later, Jason watched through the window as Slanda entered Murphy's Coffee, and Tommy greeted her warmly. "Morning, sunshine," Tommy called out. "Your usual's ready." "You're too good to me," Slanda said, her tired face brightening. "This program has been a lifesaver." Jason's chest tightened with warmth. She looked less exhausted lately, more hopeful. The small gestures were working. The weekly sunflowers, the butterfly garden he'd funded at the community center, the warm blankets that appeared in her car on cold nights. The butterfly garden had been his masterpiece. After learning about Amelia's obsession, Jason had approached the director with a spontaneous idea to create a butterfly sanctuary in the courtyard. He'd funded the entire project while ensuring Slanda never knew he was involved. "It's like magic," he'd heard Amelia tell her mother the day the garden opened. "Mama, do you think the butterflies know I love them?" "I think they do, sweetheart," Slanda had replied, and Jason had been the one in his car crying. It was the job rejection letters that nearly broke his heart. Jason had been walking past her apartment building when he'd seen her through her kitchen window, sitting at her small table with her head in her hands, crumpled papers scattered around her. Even from the street, he could see her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. He'd researched every job she'd applied for, used his connections to find out why she'd been rejected. Always the same reasons: overqualified for minimum wage positions, underqualified for better ones. Instead, he'd spent the entire night researching organizations that valued community service, creating anonymous tips to HR departments about candidates with volunteer experience. The vanilla lattes became Jason's daily highlight. Every morning at 6:47 a.m., Slanda would walk into Murphy's Coffee, and Tommy would have her drink ready. Jason would park across the street, watching her face light up with gratitude. "You know, Tommy," Slanda said one morning, "this program has been such a blessing. I don't know how you guys can afford to give away free coffee, but it's made every morning brighter." "We believe in taking care of our community," Tommy replied. "Besides, you bring good energy to this place." But it was Amelia who truly captured Jason's heart, even from a distance. He'd seen her 3 times, twice when Slanda had brought her to the community center, and once when he'd watched them walk to school together. The little girl was pure sunshine, skipping beside her mother, chattering about butterflies and books and dreams. Jason had opened a savings account for Amelia's college education that same day. The hardest part was the waiting, the watching, the loving from afar. Jason had never been patient about anything in his life, but Slanda wasn't something to be acquired. She was someone to be cherished, protected, loved properly. So he waited and planned. Every anonymous gift, every mysterious help, every small miracle was carefully orchestrated to seem like luck or kindness from strangers. Because Jason was beginning to understand that Slanda Peter was the kind of woman who gave everything to others and never asked for anything in return. She was suspicious of charity but grateful for kindness. She was proud but not too proud to accept help when it appeared to come from the universe rather than pity. As winter approached, Jason knew he would have to find a way to actually meet her properly. The anonymous gifts were wonderful, but they weren't enough anymore. He wanted to hear her voice directed at him, see her smile meant for him, be someone in her life rather than a shadow on the edges. But for now, he was content to be her guardian angel. The answer to prayers she was too proud to pray. Every sunflower, every warm blanket, every paid bill was his way of saying what he couldn't say aloud. "You are not alone. You are loved. You deserve every beautiful thing in this world." And someday, if he was very lucky and very careful, maybe he would find the courage to tell her that in person. Until then, he would keep loving her from the shadows, one small miracle at a time. Chapter 3: Collision of Hearts. The November storm struck without warning, turning the afternoon into a wall of water and wind. Slanda clutched Amelia's hand tightly as they huddled under the inadequate bus stop shelter, watching their bus disappear into the gray distance with a hiss of brakes and spray of muddy water. "The bus broke down, Mama," Amelia observed matter-of-factly, pressing her butterfly backpack against her chest. The driver looked really sad. "Yes, baby, it did." Slanda tried to keep frustration from her voice. They were already late for Amelia's doctor appointment, and now they were stranded 3 miles from the clinic with no money for a taxi and rain soaking through their thin jackets. The November wind cut through them, and Slanda watched helplessly as Amelia began to shiver. Her daughter's lips were turning blue, and the doctor's office would close in 40 minutes. Missing this appointment meant rescheduling, which they couldn't afford. "Mama, I'm cold," Amelia whispered, pressing closer. "I know, sweetheart. We'll figure this out." But panic was rising in Slanda's chest. They were truly stuck. That's when she heard the car slow down, the gentle hum of an engine approaching the curb. Through the rain, she saw an older Honda Civic pulling up. Not fancy or threatening, just practical and warm and dry. The passenger window rolled down, revealing a man with kind eyes and dark hair dampened by rain. "Excuse me," he called over the storm. "Do you need a ride somewhere?" Slanda's first instinct was to refuse. She taught Amelia never to talk to strangers, never to get in cars with people they didn't know. But something about this man felt different. Maybe it was how he'd stopped carefully, far enough away that she could run if needed. Maybe it was the genuine concern in his voice, or how he kept his hands visible on the steering wheel. Or maybe it was how Amelia looked up at her with chattering teeth and whispered, "Mama, he has nice eyes." "We're trying to get to the pediatric clinic on 5th Street, Slanda said carefully, studying his face. "Our bus broke down." "I know exactly where that is. I'm Jason, by the way." "Slanda, and this is Amelia." "Hello, Amelia," Jason said, his voice warming as he addressed her daughter. "I like your butterfly backpack." Amelia beamed despite her shivering. "Thank you. Butterflies are my favorite. Mama says they're nature's flying flowers." Jason's smile was radiant. "Your mama is very wise." Something about the way he said it, the genuine respect in his voice when he spoke about her, made Slanda's decision. "We would really appreciate a ride if you're sure it's not too much trouble." "No trouble at all," Jason said, already reaching for an umbrella. The moment Jason stepped out into the rain, Slanda felt her breath catch. He was taller than she'd expected, with broad shoulders and hands that looked capable and gentle. But it was his eyes that held her. Warm brown eyes that looked at her like she was someone worth seeing, worth saving. Jason hurried around to open the passenger door, holding the umbrella over Amelia first, then extending it to cover Slanda as well. "Careful," he murmured as they approached the car, his hand hovering near Slanda's elbow without quite touching, ready to steady her if needed. When Amelia shivered visibly, Jason immediately shrugged out of his jacket, an expensive-looking wool coat that probably cost more than Slanda made in a month. "Here, little butterfly," he said, wrapping it around Amelia's shoulders. "This should help." The jacket smelled like expensive cologne and something else, something warm and uniquely masculine that made Slanda's heart flutter unexpectedly. She tried to ignore the way the scent seemed to wrap around her own senses, tried to focus on getting Amelia settled safely in the back seat. "I can't let her keep your jacket," Slanda protested as Jason helped buckle Amelia in. "It looks expensive and we're probably getting it wet." "It's just a jacket," Jason interrupted gently. "It'll dry. She needs it more than I do right now." The kindness in his voice was so genuine, so without expectation of thanks or repayment, that Slanda felt tears prick her eyes. When had someone last put Amelia's comfort before their own convenience? As Jason drove, he kept the radio low, playing soft jazz that filled the comfortable silence in the car. Within minutes, the warmth and the soothing music had worked their magic on Amelia, who fell asleep against the window, still wrapped in Jason's jacket. Slanda found herself studying Jason's profile in the soft light from the dashboard. There was something familiar about him, though she was certain they'd never met. Maybe it was the way he drove, carefully, considerately, slowing down for puddles and taking turns gently to avoid waking Amelia. "She's beautiful," Jason said quietly, glancing in the rearview mirror at the sleeping child. "You've done an amazing job with her." "Thank you," Slanda replied, surprised by the compliment. Most people who learned she was a single mother made assumptions, offered unsolicited advice, or looked at her with pity. Jason just seemed admiring. "It can't be easy," he continued, his hands steady on the steering wheel. "Raising a child on your own." "No," Slanda admitted, something about his gentle tone making her honest. "But she's worth every struggle. She's the best thing I've ever done." Jason glanced at her then, and the look in his eyes was so intense, so full of something she couldn't name, that she felt heat rise in her cheeks. "She's lucky to have you." They drove in comfortable silence after that, the storm creating a cocoon of intimacy around them. Slanda found herself relaxing for the first time in months, lulled by the warmth, the safety, the unexpected kindness of this stranger who'd appeared just when they needed him most. When they reached the clinic, Jason carefully parked as close to the entrance as possible. "Let me help," he said, already reaching for his umbrella. "We can manage," Slanda started to protest, but Jason was already getting out of the car. "I'm sure you can," he said, with a smile that made her stomach flutter. "But you don't have to." He opened Amelia's door first, gently waking her with a soft, "Hey there, butterfly, we're here." When Amelia stirred, Jason carefully lifted her from the car, jacket and all, and carried her toward the building while Slanda grabbed their bags. "I can walk," Amelia mumbled sleepily against Jason's shoulder, but she made no move to get down. "I know you can," Jason replied, his voice tender. "But sometimes it's nice to be carried, don't you think?" At the clinic entrance, Jason gently set Amelia down, crouching to her eye level to help adjust his jacket around her small shoulders. "You keep this until you're warm, okay, little butterfly?" Amelia nodded solemnly, then surprised everyone by throwing her small arms around Jason's neck in a fierce hug. "Thank you for being our hero." Jason's eyes went wide, then suspiciously bright, as he hugged her back gently. "Thank you for letting me help." Standing up, he turned to Slanda, and for a moment they just looked at each other, rain dripping from the clinic's awning, the storm still raging around them, but somehow distant and unimportant. "I don't know how to thank you," Slanda said, meaning it completely. "You saved us today." "No thanks needed," Jason replied, his voice rough with emotion. "I'm just glad I was in the right place at the right time." He pulled out his wallet and extracted a business card, hesitating for a moment before offering it to her. "I know this might sound forward, and please don't feel any obligation, but I run a foundation that does community outreach. We're always looking for people who understand what it means to serve others. If you're ever interested in learning more." Slanda took the card, her fingers brushing his for just a moment. The contact sent electricity up her arm, and from the way Jason's breath caught, she wasn't the only one who felt it. "Jason Cloward," she read aloud, then looked up at him with curious eyes. "Cloward Foundation. You've heard of it." He seemed surprised, almost nervous. "I've seen your trucks at the community center," she said slowly. "You're the one who donated all those supplies last month? And the butterfly garden." Jason's cheeks flushed slightly. "We like to support local programs." "We need to go in," Slanda said reluctantly, glancing at the clinic doors. "But Jason, thank you for everything." "Can I?" Jason started, then stopped himself, running a hand through his damp hair. "Would it be all right if I waited?" "To make sure you get home safely. The storm is still pretty bad, and I could give you another ride." Something in his voice, hopeful and uncertain and genuinely concerned, made Slanda's heart skip. "You don't have to do that." "I know," he said simply. "I want to." Inside the clinic, as Amelia chatted excitedly to the nurse about the nice man with the butterfly car who had rescued them, Slanda found herself looking out the window every few minutes. Jason's Honda was still there, parked under the awning, and she could see his silhouette in the driver's seat. He was actually waiting. For them. For her. When Amelia's appointment was finished, they emerged to find Jason standing under the awning, umbrella at the ready. "How did it go?" he asked, genuine concern in his voice. "Perfect checkup," Slanda replied. touched that he'd asked. "She's healthy and strong." "Of course she is," Jason said, smiling down at Amelia. "She's her mother's daughter." The compliment, casual and sincere, sent warmth spreading through Slanda's chest. As they drove to her apartment, she found herself stealing glances at Jason's profile, wondering about this man who'd appeared in their lives like an answer to a prayer she hadn't even known she was praying. When they reached her building, Slanda felt a strange reluctance to leave the warm safety of his car. "This is us," she said, indicating the rundown apartment complex with a flush of embarrassment. Jason looked at the building, really looked at it, taking in the peeling paint, the broken steps, the general air of barely hanging on that characterized their home. Something flickered across his face, not judgment, but something deeper and more painful. "Let me help you get inside," he said quietly. "You've done enough," Slanda protested, but Jason was already getting out of the car with his umbrella. As they climbed the stairs to her second-floor apartment, Jason carrying Amelia again, while Slanda fumbled with her keys, she was acutely aware of what he must be seeing. The thin walls, the narrow hallway, the sound of other people's lives bleeding through inadequate insulation. At her door, Jason gently set Amelia down and started to remove his jacket from her shoulders. "Keep it," he said when Slanda started to protest. "She can return it another time." "Another time?" Slanda's heart skipped. Jason crouched down to Amelia's level, reaching into his pocket to pull out his business card. "This is for your mama, little butterfly," he said softly, pressing the card into Amelia's small hand. "But if you ever want to see the butterfly garden I helped make, maybe she can bring you by the community center sometime." Amelia's eyes went wide. "You made a butterfly garden?" "I helped," Jason said with a smile. "But I think it needs someone who really understands butterflies to appreciate it properly." As Jason stood and turned to leave, Slanda felt something like panic rise in her chest. She didn't want him to go. This man who'd appeared out of nowhere, who'd treated them with such kindness, who looked at her daughter like she was precious, and at Slanda herself like she was worth something. She didn't want him to disappear back into the storm. "Jason," she called as he reached the stairs. He turned back, hope written clearly across his face. "Yes, thank you," she said simply, "for seeing us." The smile that spread across Jason's face was radiant. "Thank you," he replied, "for letting me." As Slanda watched him drive away, Amelia tugged on her hand. "Mama, I like him. He smells like safety." Standing in their doorway, still wearing Jason's jacket that smelled like expensive cologne and unexpected kindness, Slanda had to admit that her daughter was absolutely right. For the first time in years, she felt like maybe they weren't completely alone in the world. Chapter 4: Walls and Bridges. Slanda stared at her laptop screen in the public library, her coffee growing cold as she read article after article about Jason Cloward, tech entrepreneur, philanthropist, net worth estimated in the hundreds of millions. The man who had rescued them from the storm, who had been so gentle with Amelia, who had looked at her like she mattered, was one of the wealthiest men in the city. "Mama, why do you look worried?" Amelia asked from beside her, coloring quietly in her butterfly book. "Not worried, baby, just thinking." But Slanda's heart felt heavy as she scrolled through images of Jason at charity galas, cutting ribbons at hospital openings, accepting awards for his philanthropic work. In every photo, he was surrounded by other wealthy, powerful people from a world that might as well have been another planet. What did a man like that want with a woman like her? The ugly voice of past abandonment whispered, "Rich men don't rescue poor women out of kindness. They do it because they want something." But even as the thought crossed her mind, Slanda remembered how Jason had looked at Amelia, not with calculation but with genuine tenderness. How he'd waited for them at the clinic, carried her daughter like she was precious. Her phone buzzed with an unknown number. "Hi, Slanda, this is Jason. I hope you and Amelia are doing well. Would you be available to meet tomorrow to discuss a potential opportunity at the foundation? No pressure at all. Jay." Slanda stared at the text for a long moment. Part of her wanted to ignore it, to avoid complications. But another part, the part that had felt his jacket around her shoulders, that had seen him handle her daughter with such care, was curious despite herself. She typed back, "Tomorrow at 2 p.m. works. Community Center." His response came immediately. "Perfect. Thank you for giving me a chance." The next afternoon, Slanda arrived at the community center 15 minutes early, wearing her best interview outfit. A black skirt from before Amelia was born, and a white blouse from a thrift store that she'd carefully pressed. She felt underdressed, but she held her head high as she walked into the conference room where Jason was waiting. He stood when she entered, and for a moment, they just looked at each other. He wore a navy suit that probably cost more than she made in months, but his eyes were the same, warm, genuine, slightly nervous. "Thank you for coming," he said, gesturing to a chair. "How's Amelia? Still enjoying the jacket?" Despite her nerves, Slanda smiled. "She's been wearing it constantly. I think she's convinced it has magical properties." "Maybe it does," Jason said softly, and something in his voice made her cheeks warm. As they settled into their chairs, Slanda noticed Jason's hands weren't quite steady as he arranged papers in front of him. His nervousness made her feel slightly less out of place. "So," she said, diving in before she could lose courage, "what exactly does the Cloward Foundation do?" Jason's face lit up as he began explaining his work: community outreach programs, support for local nonprofits, educational initiatives. As he spoke, Slanda found herself drawn in by his passion, how animated he became when talking about helping others. "We need someone to coordinate our community outreach programs," he explained. "Someone who understands what it means to serve others, who has genuine connections to the community we're trying to help." "And you think that's me? Based on one conversation in a car?" Jason's coffee cup rattled against his saucer as he set it down too quickly. "I've seen you at the community center. The way you are with the residents, how you remember everyone's stories. You give so much of yourself even when—" He trailed off, realizing he was revealing too much. "Even when what?" Slanda challenged. "Even when you're clearly struggling yourself. I've watched you give love to everyone but yourself. Maybe someone should give some back to you." The words hung in the air between them, and Slanda felt her heart clench. When had someone last noticed her sacrifices? When had anyone suggested that she deserved to receive care instead of just giving it? "I don't need charity," she said, but there was less fire in it than before. "It's not charity," Jason replied firmly. "It's a job. A real job with real responsibilities and a real salary. We need someone who understands the community we serve, someone who can connect with people because they've lived it, not just studied it." "Why me, though?" "Specifically me," Slanda pressed. Jason was quiet for a long moment, his eyes searching her face. "Because watching you love other people has made me believe in goodness again. Because you're exactly the kind of person who should be in charge of helping others. Because ... He stopped himself, shaking his head. "Because what?" "Because I think you're extraordinary, and I want to work with someone extraordinary." The sincerity in his voice made Slanda's chest tight. She studied his face, looking for signs of deception or hidden motives, but all she saw was genuine admiration and something deeper that made her pulse quicken. "What's the salary?" she asked, trying to regain her equilibrium. When Jason named the figure, Slanda nearly fell out of her chair. It was more than double what she made from all 3 of her jobs combined. "That's too much," she said immediately, "for community outreach." "That's not realistic." It's exactly what the position is worth, Jason countered. It's full-time work coordinating with multiple organizations, managing volunteers, developing programs, and it includes health benefits. Health benefits. Slanda tried not to let him see how much that affected her. She'd been putting off her own medical checkups for months, gambling with her health because she couldn't afford insurance. "I need to think about it," she said finally. "Of course. Take all the time you need." "Can I? Would it be all right if I gave you some information to look over? Details about the programs, testimonials from other community coordinators." As Jason gathered papers and slid them across the table, Slanda noticed something that made her heart skip. On the top sheet in the margin, she could see handwritten notes in his careful script. "Remember to mention the garden project. Ask about Amelia's school. Don't seem too eager. Don't screw this up." He'd been nervous about this meeting. He'd been preparing, making notes to himself like she was important enough to get it right. "Jason," she said as they both stood to leave, "can I ask you something?" "Anything. What do you really want from me? Because men like you don't usually notice women like me unless they want something." Jason's face went through a series of emotions: hurt, understanding, and something that looked like determination. "Men like me?" he asked quietly. "Wealthy, powerful. You could hire anyone. You could have your pick of qualified candidates with degrees and connections and all the right credentials." "You're right," Jason said, moving closer to her. "I could hire someone with an MBA who's never spent a day volunteering. I could hire someone who understands business but not people. I could hire someone who would do the job professionally and efficiently and without any real passion." He paused, his eyes holding hers intently. "But I don't want someone like that. I want someone who gives her grocery money to buy birthday cakes for elderly residents. I want someone who remembers that Mrs. Patterson likes 2 sugars in her tea and that Mr. Chen worries about his grandson in college. I want someone who understands what it means to struggle and still chooses to help others." "How do you know about Mrs. Patterson's tea?" Slanda asked, something clicking in her mind. Jason's face went pale. The director mentioned..." But Slanda was remembering other things now. The way he'd known exactly where the pediatric clinic was. The way he'd appeared just when they needed help. The timing of the rent payment, the mysterious coffee loyalty program, all the small miracles that had been happening in her life lately. "It's been you," she whispered. "The rent, the coffee, all of it. You've been watching me." Jason looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. "Slanda, I can explain." "You've been what? Playing some kind of game? Seeing how long you could manipulate me before I figured it out?" "No. God, no, it's not like that at all." "Then what is it like?" she demanded, anger and hurt warring in her chest. Jason ran his hands through his hair, destroying its perfect styling. It's like I saw an angel working miracles for other people, and I wanted to work a few miracles for her. It's like I fell in love with your kindness and wanted to give some back to you. It's like I've never met anyone like you in my entire life, and I've been trying to find the courage to tell you that." The words hung between them, raw and honest, and terrifying in their intensity. "You don't even know me," Slanda whispered. "I know you sing when you braid Mrs. Patterson's hair. I know you remember everyone's birthday, and you cry over job rejection letters, and you work yourself to exhaustion taking care of everyone else. I know you love your daughter more than life itself, and you do anything to give her a better future. I know you're the strongest, most generous, most beautiful person I've ever encountered." "Beautiful?" Slanda laughed bitterly. "Look at me, Jason. Really look at me. I wear thrift store clothes, and I haven't had a real haircut in months, and I'm so tired I can barely stand up most days. Men like you don't fall for women like me." "You're wrong," Jason said fiercely, stepping closer to her. You want to know what I see when I look at you? I see someone who lights up every room she enters. I see hands that are gentle and eyes that are kind, and a smile that could stop traffic. I see a woman who gives everything she has to others and somehow still has more to give. I see someone so beautiful that I can't sleep at night thinking about her. Slanda stared at him, her heart pounding. You're crazy. Probably, Jason agreed, but I'm also in love with you. The words hit Slanda like a physical blow. She took a step back, shaking her head. You can't just say things like that. Why not? It's true. Because, Slanda struggled for words. Because people like you don't love people like me. Because I'm poor and broken, and I have nothing to offer someone like you. Because I can't afford to believe in fairy tales. What if it's not a fairy tale? Jason asked softly. What if it's just love? That evening, after picking up Amelia from after-school care, Slanda sat at her kitchen table with Jason's job offer spread out in front of her. The salary would change their lives completely. She could afford a better apartment, better food, medical care, maybe even start saving for Amelia's college education. But at what cost? Mama, you look worried, Amelia said, climbing into her lap. Just thinking about grown-up stuff, Slanda replied, wrapping her arms around her daughter. Is it about the nice man with the butterfly garden? Slanda's head snapped up. How do you know about that? I heard you on the phone with Mrs. Patterson, Amelia said innocently. She said he made the garden just for people who love butterflies. That's nice, right? Very nice, Slanda murmured. I think he likes you, Mama. What makes you say that? The way he looked at you in the car, Amelia said with 6-year-old wisdom. Like when I look at chocolate cake, happy and hungry at the same time. Despite everything, Slanda found herself smiling. Happy and hungry? Uh-huh. And he smelled safe, remember? I think safe-smelling people are good people. That night, after Amelia was asleep, Slanda's phone rang. Jason's name appeared on the screen, and her heart skipped as she answered. I'm sorry for earlier, he said without preamble. I know I came on too strong. I know this all sounds crazy. It does sound crazy, Slanda agreed. But does it sound impossible? Slanda was quiet for a long moment, thinking about the way he'd looked at her daughter, the way he'd waited for them at the clinic, the way his hands had shaken when he'd tried to explain himself. No, she said finally, it doesn't sound impossible. She could hear Jason's sharp intake of breath. It means I'll consider everything, Slanda said carefully. Everything. The job, your explanations, the possibility that maybe fairy tales aren't always just stories. When Jason spoke again, his voice was thick with emotion. Thank you for giving me a chance. After hanging up, Slanda looked at the job offer again, then at the photo of her and Amelia on her refrigerator. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine a future that didn't involve constant struggle, constant fear, constant exhaustion. A future where someone like Jason Cloward might actually love someone like her. It still sounded impossible, but maybe, just maybe, it was worth finding out if impossible things could sometimes come true. Chapter 5. Healing Old Wounds. 3 weeks into working at the Cloward Foundation, Slanda was beginning to understand that Jason Cloward defied every expectation she'd had about wealthy philanthropists. He showed up in jeans as often as suits, brought coffee for the entire staff every Friday, and had a habit of rolling up his sleeves to help with whatever needed doing, regardless of how menial the task. You don't have to help me stuff envelopes, Slanda said as Jason settled beside her at the conference table, sleeves pushed up. Don't you have important CEO things to do? This is important, Jason replied, reaching for donation letters. Besides, I like working with you. The admission was so simple, so honest, that Slanda felt her cheeks warm. Over 3 weeks, they'd fallen into an easy working relationship that felt natural and comfortable. Jason valued her opinions, listened to her ideas, and treated her like an equal partner rather than an employee. "Tell me about the scholarship program you want to expand," Jason said as they worked. "You mentioned focusing on single mothers." Slanda nodded, passion evident in her voice. "So many women get stuck in poverty cycles because they can't afford education while supporting children. If we could provide childcare support along with tuition assistance." "I love it," Jason said immediately. "What would you need to make it happen?" "Probably about 50,000 to start," Slanda said hesitantly. "I know that's a lot. Consider it approved." Slanda looked up in surprise. "Just like that?" "Just like that." Jason's eyes were warm as they met hers. "Slanda, you could ask me for $1 million to help people, and I'd find a way. Your instincts about what the community needs are perfect." The faith in his voice, the absolute trust he placed in her judgment, made Slanda's chest tight with emotion. When had anyone ever believed in her like this? As the afternoon wore on, they settled into comfortable conversation while they worked. Jason asked about Amelia's school, and Slanda found herself sharing more than she usually did. Her concerns about overcrowded classrooms, her pride in her daughter's reading progress, her worries about affording constantly needed school supplies. "She wants to be a veterinarian," Slanda said with a smile. "Last week she set up a hospital for her stuffed animals and charged me 5 butterfly stickers per patient." Jason laughed, the sound rich and genuine. "Smart businesswoman. Takes after her mother." "I don't know about that," Slanda said, her smile fading slightly. "Sometimes I feel like I'm barely keeping my head above water, let alone being a good example for her." "Are you kidding?" Jason's voice was fierce with conviction. "Slanda, you're the best mother I've ever seen. The way Amelia looks at you, the way she talks about you, she knows she's loved. She knows she's safe. She knows her mother would move heaven and earth for her. That's everything." Something in his tone made Slanda look up sharply. "You sound like you speak from experience." Jason's hands stilled on the envelope he was sealing. "My parents loved me, but they were busy. Important people with important responsibilities. I spent more time with nannies than with them." "That must have been lonely," Slanda said softly. "It was," Jason admitted. "I used to wonder if they'd notice if I disappeared for a few days. Turned out the answer was no. I ran away when I was 8, and it took them 6 hours to realize I was missing." Slanda's heart clenched. "Jason, I'm not telling you this for sympathy. I just want you to understand that what you give Amelia, that unconditional love, that presence, that priority you make her in your life, that's precious. That's everything." They worked in comfortable silence after that, but Slanda found herself stealing glances at Jason, seeing him in a new light. The lonely little boy he'd been was still there somehow, hidden beneath the successful businessman exterior. As evening approached and the foundation offices grew quiet, Slanda realized she was falling behind on the newsletter she needed to finish for tomorrow's mailing. She glanced at the clock, 5:30 p.m. She'd need to pick up Amelia from aftercare by 6 o'clock, which meant leaving now. "You go ahead," Jason said, noticing her dilemma. "I can finish this up." "I can't ask you to do that," Slanda protested. "You're not asking. I'm offering." Slanda hesitated, torn between responsibility and necessity. "I hate leaving work unfinished. And I hate the idea of Amelia wondering where her mother is," Jason replied gently. "Go. I've got this." That night, as Slanda was helping Amelia with her homework, her phone buzzed with an email from Jason. He'd finished the newsletter and sent her the final draft, but attached was also a note. "Found this on your desk. Thought you might need it." Slanda's heart sank as she opened the second attachment. It was the rejection letter from Amelia's dream school, the private academy with the advanced science program that would be perfect for her aspiring veterinarian daughter. The letter cited financial need as the reason for denial, despite Amelia's excellent academic record. The rejection had come the week before she'd started at the foundation, when $50,000 tuition might as well have been $50 million. She'd cried over it for hours, then hidden it away where Amelia wouldn't see and start asking questions. Her phone rang and Jason's name appeared on the screen. "I'm sorry," he said as soon as she answered. "I didn't mean to invade your privacy. The letter was just sitting there and I thought it might be important." "It's fine," Slanda said, though her voice came out thick with unshed tears. "No, it's not fine. You're crying. I can hear it in your voice." Slanda was quiet for a moment, struggling with how much to reveal. "It's just, I wanted to give her everything, you know? I wanted her to have opportunities I never had, but $50,000 might as well be $50 million. "What if it wasn't?" Jason asked quietly. "What do you mean? What if I told you that the foundation has a scholarship program specifically for employees' children? What if I told you that program could cover full tuition, books, and even transportation?" Slanda felt her breath catch. "Jason, you can't just create a scholarship program for me." "I'm not creating it for you. I'm creating it for all our employees who want better opportunities for their children. You'd just be the first to benefit from it." "That's the same thing." "No, it's not. It's me wanting to invest in the futures of families who work hard to make our community better. It's me wanting kids like Amelia to have every chance to become the amazing adults I know they'll be." Slanda closed her eyes, overwhelmed by his generosity and terrified of accepting it. "I can't keep letting you solve all my problems. What if I'm not solving your problems? What if I'm just removing obstacles so you can solve them yourself?" The next evening, Slanda stayed late to finish the quarterly report, losing track of time as she got absorbed in documenting all the programs they'd launched since she'd started. When she finally looked up, the office was dark except for her desk lamp, and her neck was stiff from hunching over her computer. "Working late again?" Slanda jumped, then smiled as Jason appeared in her doorway, holding 2 cups of coffee. "I wanted to finish this tonight so we could review it tomorrow." "You know you don't have to prove yourself to me, right?" Jason said, settling into the chair across from her desk. "I already know you're incredible at this job." "I'm not trying to prove anything," Slanda protested, though they both knew it wasn't entirely true. "I just want to do good work." "You do amazing work. The community center residents rave about the new programs you've implemented. Mrs. Patterson told me yesterday that you've brought more joy to that place than it's seen in years." "Mrs. Patterson says things like that about everyone." "No, she doesn't," Jason corrected gently. "She says things like that about you." As they reviewed the report together, Slanda found herself watching Jason's face in the soft lamplight. He was focused on her work, asking thoughtful questions and offering suggestions that showed he truly understood what she was trying to accomplish. "This section on the Senior Companion Program is brilliant," he said, pointing to a paragraph on her screen. "The way you've structured it so volunteers gain as much as they give. That's genius." "It wasn't my idea originally," Slanda admitted. "My mother used to volunteer at a nursing home before she got sick. She always said she got more from the residents than she gave them." "Your mother sounds like a wise woman." "She was," Slanda said softly. "She would have loved what we're doing here." "Tell me about her," Jason said, his voice gentle. And somehow, in the quiet intimacy of the empty office, Slanda found herself opening up about her mother. Her strength, her kindness, her final months when roles had reversed and Slanda had become the caregiver. Jason listened without interruption, his eyes never leaving her face. "She died holding my hand," Slanda finished, her voice barely above a whisper. "Her last words were, 'Take care of my girls.' She meant me and Amelia. She sounds like an amazing mother, Jason said quietly. She was. She raised me alone after my father left, and she never once made it seem like a burden. Even when she was dying, she was more worried about me than herself. Is that why you're so determined to do everything yourself? Jason asked gently. Because she did? Slanda looked up at him, surprised by the insight. Maybe. She always said the only person you can count on is yourself. She was protecting you, Jason said. But Slanda, what if she was wrong? What if sometimes you can count on other people too? The vulnerability in his voice made Slanda's chest tight. People leave, Jason. They always leave. Not always. My father did. He promised he'd be back, and I spent months watching the door, waiting for him to keep his word. He never did. Jason was quiet for a long moment, then he spoke with careful honesty. My parents never left physically, but they were never really there either. Different kind of abandonment, same result. You learn not to expect too much from people. They sat in comfortable silence, both lost in their own painful memories. Finally, Jason spoke again. What if we're both wrong? He said quietly. What if some people stay? Before Slanda could respond, exhaustion hit her like a wave. The long day, the emotional conversation, the late hour, it all caught up with her at once. Her eyes drifted closed despite her efforts to stay alert. Slanda? Jason's voice seemed to come from far away. She tried to open her eyes, but they felt impossibly heavy. You're falling asleep at your desk. Just resting my eyes, she mumbled, though she was clearly losing the battle with consciousness. Jason watched her for a moment, his heart clenching at the exhaustion written across her beautiful face. Quietly, he stood and retrieved his suit jacket from the back of his chair. With infinite gentleness, he draped it around her shoulders, careful not to wake her. Then he settled back into his chair and opened his laptop, determined to let her sleep while he worked on emails. Every few minutes, he found himself looking up at her peaceful face, memorizing the way her hair fell across her cheek, the way her lips curved slightly in sleep. When Slanda woke 3 hours later, she found herself covered by Jason's jacket and surrounded by the warm scent that had become familiar. Jason was still there, working quietly at his laptop, and on her desk was a fresh cup of coffee and a note. You work too hard taking care of everyone else. Let someone take care of you. Jay. You didn't have to stay, Slanda said, sitting up and immediately missing the warmth of his jacket. I wanted to, Jason replied simply. Besides, someone had to make sure you got to your car safely. Slanda looked at the clock. 11:30 p.m. Jason, you've been here for over 3 hours watching me sleep. That's crazy. A little crazy, he admitted with a smile, but I liked knowing you were getting rest. As they gathered their things to leave, Slanda found herself studying Jason's profile. Why do you do it? She asked suddenly. Do what? Take care of me. Take care of everyone. You could just write checks and call it philanthropy, but you actually care. You actually show up. Why? Jason was quiet for a long moment as they walked to the parking garage. Do you remember what you told me about your mother's last words? Take care of my girls. My father's last words to me were, try not to disappoint me. Different families, different values. Jason stopped beside his car, his eyes sad but determined. I guess I want to be the kind of person who tells the people I care about that they matter, not the kind who makes them wonder if they're good enough. The honesty in his voice made Slanda's breath catch. Jason, I know it's probably too much. I know I come on too strong, and you have every right to tell me to back off. But Slanda, watching you love other people has made me want to be better, has made me want to love people better. And you think I'm one of those people you want to love better? Jason's eyes met hers in the dim parking garage lighting. I think you're the person I want to love best, The words hung between them, honest and terrifying and beautiful. Slanda felt her carefully constructed walls cracking, letting in possibilities she'd been afraid to imagine. "I'm scared," she whispered. "Of me? Of this? Of believing that someone like you could actually care about someone like me? Of letting myself hope and then having it all fall apart?" Jason stepped closer, his voice gentle but fierce. "I can't promise that I'll never hurt you. I can't promise that I'll always know the right thing to say or do. But I can promise that I will never stop trying to be worthy of your trust. I can promise that every day I will choose to care about you and Amelia. I can promise that if you let me, I will spend my life proving that not everyone leaves." Slanda looked into his eyes, those warm, honest, completely sincere eyes, and felt something shift inside her chest. For the first time since her father had walked out, she found herself wanting to believe that maybe some people really did stay. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay? Okay, let's see if you're right. Let's see if some people really do stay." Jason's smile was radiant in the dim light. "Thank you for giving me the chance to prove it." As they stood together in that parking garage, surrounded by the quiet of the late night and the promise of tomorrow, Slanda finally allowed herself to acknowledge what had been growing in her heart for weeks. She was falling in love with Jason Cloward, and for the first time in her adult life, that didn't terrify her completely. Chapter 6: The Father's Return. The last person Slanda expected to see walking into the community center on a Tuesday afternoon was the man who had abandoned her family 10 years ago. But there he was, Adam Bailey, looking older but still handsome in that careless way that had once charmed her mother. His salt and pepper hair was styled, his clothes expensive but casual, and his smile was exactly as calculated as she remembered. "Hello, princess," he said, using the pet name that had once made her feel special and now made her skin crawl. Slanda froze while helping Mrs. Patterson with physical therapy, her hands tightening on the elderly woman's walker. "What are you doing here?" "Is that any way to greet your father?" Adam asked, his voice carrying that familiar tone of wounded charm. "I've been looking for you. You're not easy to track down." "That was intentional," Slanda replied, her voice steadier than she felt. Mrs. Patterson was watching with sharp eyes, clearly sensing tension. "Slanda, dear," Mrs. Patterson said quietly, "would you like me to call someone?" "No, it's fine," Slanda said quickly, not wanting to cause a scene. "Let's finish your exercises, then I'll deal with this." But Adam wasn't interested in waiting. "We need to talk, Slanda. I have things to explain, apologies to make, and I want to meet my granddaughter." The mention of Amelia sent ice through Slanda's veins. "No." "She's family too," Adam pressed, his voice taking on that wheedling quality she remembered. "I have rights." "You have no rights," Slanda cut him off, her voice sharp enough to draw attention. "You gave up any rights when you walked out and never looked back." Jason had been in the Foundation's meeting room reviewing budget reports when he heard raised voices in the main activity area. He recognized Slanda's voice immediately, distressed, angry, defensive, and was moving toward the commotion before he'd consciously decided to investigate. He stopped in the doorway, taking in the scene. Slanda standing protectively beside Mrs. Patterson, her face pale but fierce, confronting a well-dressed man who was clearly agitating her. Jason's protective instincts flared immediately. "Is everything all right here?" he asked, stepping into the room with the kind of calm authority that came from years of business negotiations. Adam's eyes immediately assessed Jason, taking in his expensive watch, his confident posture, the way Slanda's tension seemed to ease slightly at his presence. "And you are?" "Jason Cloward," Jason replied evenly, moving to stand beside Slanda without quite touching her. "I'm the director of the foundation that supports this center." "You are?" Adam Bailey, the man replied, extending his hand with practiced charm. Slanda's father. Jason felt every muscle in his body tense, but he shook the offered hand briefly. This was the man who had abandoned Slanda and her mother. This was the man whose leaving had taught Slanda that people always left eventually. Jason already disliked him intensely. I wasn't aware Slanda was expecting family today, Jason said politely, but there was steel beneath his words. It's a surprise visit, Adam said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. We have a lot of catching up to do. Actually, we don't, Slanda said firmly. I was just explaining to Mr. Bailey that now isn't a good time. Come now, princess, Adam said, his tone becoming slightly condescending. Surely you can spare a few minutes for your old dad. I've heard such interesting things about your new situation. The way he said situation made Jason's jaw clench. There was something calculating in Adam Bailey's expression, something that suggested he'd done his homework before showing up here. Perhaps we should move this conversation somewhere more private, Jason suggested, glancing meaningfully at the elderly residents who were pretending not to listen while clearly fascinated by the drama unfolding. Actually, Slanda said quickly, I don't think that's necessary. Mr. Bailey was just leaving. Oh, I don't think so, Adam said, his charming mask slipping slightly. You see, I've been doing some research on my daughter's new life, working for the Cloward Foundation, dating the wealthy philanthropist, quite a step up from how you were living before. Jason felt Slanda flinch beside him, and his protective instincts roared to life. I think you need to leave, he said, his voice low and dangerous. Do I? Adam asked, turning his attention fully to Jason. Because it seems to me like you're the one who's been taking care of my family, and I'm wondering what you expect in return. Adam, Slanda said, her voice shaking with anger. Stop it. No, I think it's a fair question, Adam continued, clearly enjoying the discomfort he was causing. Rich men don't usually rescue poor single mothers out of the goodness of their hearts. There's always a price. Jason stepped slightly in front of Slanda, his hand finding hers and squeezing reassuringly. The only thing I expect from Slanda is her continued friendship and partnership in the important work we do here. Beyond that, her personal life is none of your business. Her personal life became my business the moment you started playing house with my daughter and granddaughter, Adam shot back. You lost the right to have opinions about my personal life 10 years ago, Slanda said, her voice growing stronger. And you will never be a part of Amelia's life, ever. Adam's expression darkened. That's not your decision to make alone. Actually, it is, Jason interjected smoothly. Since you have no legal standing as Amelia's grandfather, having voluntarily abandoned any parental rights long ago, I assume you know that threatening legal action without basis constitutes harassment. The legal terminology seemed to surprise Adam, and Jason could see him recalculating his approach. This isn't about legal action, he said, his voice becoming reasonable again. This is about family, about making amends. You want to make amends? Slanda asked, her voice bitter. Where were you when Mom was dying? Where were you when I was working 3 jobs just to keep a roof over our heads? Where were you when your granddaughter was asking why she didn't have a grandfather like the other kids? I made mistakes, Adam admitted, but there was no real remorse in his voice. I was young, I was scared, I wasn't ready for that kind of responsibility. But I'm older now, more settled. I want to be part of your lives. What changed? Jason asked quietly, his business instincts telling him there was more to this story. Adam's eyes flickered with something calculating. I heard my daughter was doing well for herself. I'm proud of what she's accomplished. You're proud? Slanda laughed harshly. You're proud of what I accomplished without you, despite you. You're proud that someone else helped us when you couldn't be bothered. I can help now, Adam said quickly. I'm in a better position financially. I could contribute to Amelia's education, her future." "No," Slanda said immediately. "Don't be so hasty," Adam pressed. "Think about what's best for Amelia. Wouldn't she benefit from having a grandfather who could provide for her?" "She has everything she needs," Jason said firmly. Adam's eyes narrowed as he looked between them. "Ah, I see. The boyfriend is paying for everything. How modern." His tone was mocking, designed to hurt. "Tell me, Slanda, what exactly are you providing in this arrangement?" Jason felt rage flood through him at the implication, but before he could respond, Slanda stepped forward, her eyes blazing. "Get out," she said, her voice deadly quiet. "Get out now and don't come back." "Now, princess." "Don't call me that," Slanda exploded. "You don't get to call me that anymore. You don't get to waltz back into my life and act like the past 10 years didn't happen. You don't get to insult me or the man who has shown me more genuine care in 3 months than you showed me in 18 years. "So you're defending your rich boyfriend now," Adam sneered. "How touching. I wonder what he'll think when he gets tired of playing savior to the poor little single mother." The words hit their mark, and Jason saw Slanda's confidence waver for just a moment. That tiny crack in her armor made his own temper snap. "That's enough," Jason said, his voice carrying the kind of authority that had closed million-dollar deals and intimidated corporate lawyers. "You need to leave. Now." "I'm not going anywhere until I've said what I came to say," Adam replied stubbornly. "Then let me say something," Jason said, stepping closer to Adam with barely controlled fury. "I'm the man who loves her enough to respect her choices, something you never learned. I'm the man who sees her strength and independence as gifts, not inconveniences. And I'm the man who will make sure you never hurt her or Amelia again." "Love?" Adam laughed. "You think this is love? You think a man like you falls in love with a woman like her? You're using her, just like every other man will. The only difference is you're rich enough to make the using comfortable." Jason felt something cold and dangerous settle in his chest. "You're wrong about everything," he said quietly. "But most of all, you're wrong about her. Slanda Peter is the strongest, most generous, most extraordinary woman I've ever met. She's worth 10 of you, and the fact that you can't see that is exactly why you don't deserve to be in her life." "Pretty words," Adam said dismissively, "but we'll see how long they last when the novelty wears off." "Get out," Slanda said again, her voice breaking slightly. "Please, just go." "Fine," Adam said, straightening his jacket. "But this isn't over. I know where you work now. I know where you live. Amelia is my granddaughter, and I have rights." "No," Jason interrupted, pulling out his phone. "You have no rights, but you do have about 30 seconds to leave before I call security and have you escorted out for harassment." Adam looked between them, clearly assessing whether Jason was bluffing. Something in Jason's expression must have convinced him, because he stepped back. "This isn't over," he repeated, but there was less conviction in his voice now. "Yes, it is," Slanda said firmly. "It's been over for 10 years. Don't come back." As Adam finally left, Slanda remained standing rigidly until she was sure he was gone. Then, suddenly, her knees gave out, and she would have collapsed if Jason hadn't caught her immediately. "Hey, I've got you," Jason murmured, holding her against his chest as she began to shake. "He's gone. You're safe." "I'm sorry," Slanda whispered against his shirt. "I'm so sorry you had to see that, had to deal with that." "Don't apologize," Jason said fiercely, stroking her hair. "Don't you dare apologize for his behavior." Mrs. Patterson rolled her walker closer, her face creased with concern. "Dear, are you all right?" "I will be," Slanda said, trying to pull herself together. But Jason didn't let her go. "It's okay to not be okay right now," he said quietly. "That was traumatic." He can't hurt us, Slanda said, as if trying to convince herself. He has no legal rights. He can't take Amelia. He can't, Jason confirmed. I won't let him. That evening, Jason insisted on driving Slanda home and walking her to her apartment. He could see she was still shaken, jumping at every sound, checking over her shoulder constantly. He won't come here, Jason said as they climbed the stairs to her apartment. He's a coward who preys on emotional manipulation. When that doesn't work, he backs down. You don't know him like I do, Slanda said quietly. He's persistent when he wants something. What do you think he wants? Money, Slanda said without hesitation. He's heard about you, about your foundation, about our... whatever this is between us. He thinks there's money to be made. At her apartment door, Slanda hesitated. Jason, what he said about you getting tired of me. Stop, Jason said immediately, turning to face her fully. Don't let his poison into your head. But what if he's right? What if this is just some kind of temporary thing for you? What if you do get bored when the novelty wears off? Jason cupped her face gently in his hands, his eyes intense and sincere. Slanda, listen to me. What I feel for you isn't novelty or charity or some kind of savior complex. It's love, real, deep, lasting love, the kind that grows stronger over time, not weaker. How can you be so sure? Because every day I know you, I find something new to love about you. Your strength, your kindness, your fierce protection of the people you care about. Today, watching you stand up to him, seeing you defend not just yourself, but me, I've never been more certain of anything in my life. Slanda searched his face, looking for any sign of uncertainty or doubt. All she found was absolute conviction. Will you stay tonight? She asked quietly. On the couch, I mean. I don't want to be alone tonight. Of course, Jason said immediately. Whatever you need. Inside the apartment, Amelia was already asleep, and Slanda checked on her 3 times before finally settling on the couch next to Jason. She's safe, Jason said gently. I promise you she's safe. He wants to hurt me, Slanda said quietly. He doesn't care about Amelia, not really. He just wants to hurt me because I survived without him. Then he's going to be disappointed, Jason replied, because you didn't just survive. You thrived. You built a beautiful life with your daughter. You help people every day. You're loved and respected by everyone who knows you. You won. Slanda looked at him, this man who had somehow become her anchor in the storm of her emotions. What did I do to deserve you? You were yourself, Jason said simply. You were kind and strong and generous, and you made me want to be worthy of you. Later that night, when Amelia woke from a nightmare about the mean man, it was Jason who sat by her bed, telling gentle stories about brave butterflies until she fell back asleep. And it was Jason who found Slanda watching from the doorway, tears streaming down her face. Thank you, she whispered as they returned to the living room. For what? For protecting us. For seeing him for what he really is. For not believing his lies about me. Jason stopped walking and turned to face her fully. Slanda, I need you to understand something. There is nothing anyone could say about you that would make me love you less. You are good and worthy and deserving of love, and no one will ever convince me otherwise. Before she could respond, Jason reached out and gently wiped the tears from her cheeks. He can't hurt you anymore. I won't let him. Standing there in her small living room, surrounded by the quiet safety of her home and the steady strength of Jason's presence, Slanda finally felt the last of her walls crumble. This man hadn't just fallen in love with her, he had chosen to stand between her and anything that would harm her. For the first time in her life, she truly felt protected, and it was the most beautiful feeling in the world. Chapter 7. Love in the Shadows. The withdrawal was gradual. Jason noticed it in small things. how slander started arriving at work exactly on time instead of early, how she stopped lingering after meetings, how she began eating lunch at her desk. It had been a week since Adam Bailey's appearance, and slander was pulling further away each day. "Good morning," Jason said as he passed her office. "Morning," slander replied without looking up, her tone polite but distant. The professional distance cut through him like a knife. He understood what was happening. Adam Bailey's poisonous words had found their mark. Despite everything Jason had said, slander was retreating, building walls to protect her heart. That evening, Jason sat in his car outside the community center, watching slander volunteer with the residents. She was still gentle with them, but he could see the exhaustion, the weight she was carrying. When Mrs. Patterson mentioned her upcoming birthday, Jason saw Slander's face fall. He knew that look, someone who wanted to do something special but couldn't afford it. The next Monday, Mrs. Patterson was surprised by a small birthday celebration. Beautiful cake, flowers, and her favorite residents gathered around. When she asked who had arranged it, she was told it was an anonymous donor. From across the street, Jason watched Slanda's face light up as Mrs. Patterson hugged her. The joy in Slanda's expression was worth everything. It became Jason's mission, loving Slanda from the shadows while respecting the space she needed. When Amelia missed the butterfly garden during winter, Jason arranged for an artist to paint monarch butterflies on her bedroom window. When Slanda had the flu, meals appeared at her door from a grateful community member. The hardest part was maintaining distance at work. Jason communicated with Slanda only through emails and brief conversations. He learned her new patterns: lunch at 12:30, leaving exactly at 5 p.m., avoiding the break room when he might be there. "She's scared," Martha observed during one of their meetings. Whatever that man said rattled her. "I know," Jason replied quietly. "I just don't know how to fix it." Maybe she has to figure out for herself that not all men are like her father. The crisis came Thursday morning when Jason found Slanda's office empty and a resignation letter on his desk. "Dear Jason, I'm writing to inform you of my resignation from the Cloward Foundation, effective immediately. This was not an easy decision, but I believe it's the right one for everyone involved. Thank you for your understanding. Sincerely, Slanda Peter." Jason read the letter 3 times, each reading making his chest tighter. The formal language, the careful distance, it was Slanda protecting herself in the only way she knew how. He found her in the parking garage, loading boxes into her car. "You can't just leave," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I can and I am," Slanda replied without turning around. "Why?" "Because of what your father said." Finally, she turned to face him, and Jason's heart broke at the pain in her eyes. "It's about me remembering who I am and where I belong. I saw the pictures, Jason, in the magazines, online. You with society women, philanthropists, people from your world. I'm not those women. I'm a high school graduate who works at a community center. I live in a tiny apartment and buy my clothes at thrift stores. I don't want you to navigate my world," Jason said fiercely. "I want to be part of yours." "For how long?" "Until the novelty wears off, until someone more appropriate comes along." "There is no one more appropriate than you," Jason said. "There is no expiration date on what I feel for you." But Slanda was already getting into her car. "I'm sorry, Jason, but I can't do this anymore." As she drove away, Jason stood alone, feeling like his heart was being ripped from his chest. But even in his devastation, he knew he wasn't giving up. He would love her from whatever distance she needed. The next few weeks were painful. Jason went to work, managed foundation business, and functioned like a normal person. But every moment was colored by Slanda's absence. Every success felt hollow without her there to share it. He found himself parking near Amelia's school just to catch glimpses of them together. She looked tired, the weight of carrying everything alone again, the exhaustion of multiple jobs. It killed him to watch her struggle when he could fix everything with a phone call, but he respected her choice even as it broke his heart. When Martha called to tell him that Amelia had pneumonia and needed hospitalization, Jason's careful restraint shattered. The woman he loved and the child he'd come to adore were in crisis, and nothing else mattered. Jason contacted the best pediatric specialists, ensuring Amelia had every advantage possible. He spoke quietly with the billing department about an anonymous fund, making sure Slanda would never see a hospital bill. His donation to the children's wing ensured complete discretion. He spent 3 days at the hospital, staying out of sight but close enough to know immediately if anything changed. He caught glimpses of Slanda in hallways, looking exhausted and terrified, and it took every ounce of self-control not to go to her. On the third night, when Amelia's fever broke and she was declared out of danger, Jason sat in his car and wept with relief. It was a nurse's accidental slip that revealed his involvement. While updating Slanda on discharge instructions, she mentioned Mr. Cloward's excellent care arrangements. 20 minutes later, Slanda found Jason in the hospital cafeteria, looking exhausted. His hair was disheveled, his clothes wrinkled, dark circles under his eyes. "How long have you been here?" she asked quietly, sliding into the seat across from him. 3 days, he admitted. "You've been here for 3 days and I didn't know." "You made it clear you didn't want me in your life," Jason said simply. "But I couldn't stay away when Amelia was sick." Slanda stared at him, taking in his obvious exhaustion, his trembling hands. "You look terrible." "I feel terrible," Jason admitted. "I've been terrified. I love her too, Slanda. I love both of you." "You paid for everything, didn't you?" "Yes," Jason said quietly. "And I'd do it again without hesitation." "Why?" "Because she's yours. Because she's part of you, and I love every part of you. Because I couldn't live with myself if something happened to her, and I hadn't done everything possible to help. Even though I left, even though I hurt you." "Especially then," Jason replied. "Love doesn't stop because someone pushes you away. It doesn't stop because someone is scared. It doesn't stop, period." Slanda felt tears starting to fall, but for the first time in weeks, they weren't tears of fear. They were tears of understanding, of gratitude, of a love so deep and patient that she was finally beginning to believe it might actually be real. "I've been so scared," she whispered. "I know," Jason said gently. "I thought if I pushed you away first, it would hurt less when you inevitably left. But I didn't leave," Jason pointed out quietly. "Even when you pushed me away, even when you quit, even when you told me to stay out of your life, I didn't leave. I'm still here." Slanda looked into his eyes, those warm, honest, completely devoted eyes, and finally allowed herself to see what had been there all along. This wasn't temporary infatuation. This was real, lasting, unconditional love. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry for not trusting you, for believing him instead of you, for being too scared to believe in us." "You don't have anything to apologize for," Jason said immediately. "You were protecting yourself and Amelia the only way you knew how." "But I hurt you." "You were worth the hurt," Jason said simply. "You're worth everything." As they sat together in that hospital cafeteria, Slanda finally understood what Jason had been trying to tell her. Some people really do stay. Some love really is strong enough to weather storms, patient enough to wait through fear, and deep enough to love without conditions. And maybe, just maybe, she was worth that kind of love after all. Chapter 8. The Truth Unveiled. They walked through the hospital corridors in silence, both lost in their own thoughts as they made their way to Amelia's room. The little girl was sleeping peacefully, finally looking like herself again after 3 terrifying days. Jason hung back in the doorway while Slanda checked on her daughter, adjusting the blankets and pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. "She looks so much better," Slanda whispered as they stepped back into the hallway. "The doctors say she can go home tomorrow," Jason replied. "Full recovery expected." "Thank you," Slanda said, turning to face him fully. "I know I said it already, but I need to say it again. Thank you for being here, for taking care of her." "You don't need to thank me for loving her," Jason said quietly. The words hung between them, simple and profound. Jason had said he loved Amelia, not as a favor to Slanda, but genuinely, completely, as if she were his own. "Jason," Slanda began, then stopped, overwhelmed by everything she wanted to say. "I know," he said gently. "It's a lot to process. You don't have to say anything right now." "But I do," Slanda insisted. "I need to explain." "Later," Jason interrupted softly. "When you've had some rest, when Amelia's home safe." "I'm not going anywhere." The next evening, Jason found himself helping Amelia with her homework while Slanda made dinner in their tiny kitchen. It felt like stepping into a life he'd dreamed about, but never thought he'd actually experience. "Mr. Jason," Amelia said, looking up from her math worksheet, "Mama said you helped make me better." "The doctors made you better," Jason replied. "I just made sure you had the best doctors." "But you stayed at the hospital the whole time?" "Yes." "Why?" Jason looked into Amelia's curious brown eyes and felt his heart clench. "Because I was worried about you. Because I care about what happens to you. Like how Mama cares about me." "Yes," Jason said softly. "Like that." Amelia nodded solemnly, then surprised him by climbing into his lap and wrapping her small arms around his neck. "Thank you for caring about me like Mama does." Over Amelia's head, Jason met Slanda's eyes across the small apartment. She was watching them with an expression he couldn't quite read, something between wonder and terror, hope and fear. After Amelia was settled in bed, Slanda and Jason found themselves alone on the couch, the weight of everything unsaid pressing between them. "I need to tell you something," Slanda said quietly, "about why I really left the foundation." "You don't have to." "Yes, I do." Slanda turned to face him fully. "It wasn't just about what my father said. It was about the pictures. Pictures of you with other women. I found them online when I was researching the foundation." Slanda's voice was barely above a whisper. "Beautiful, sophisticated women at charity events. Women who looked like they belonged in your world." Jason felt understanding dawn. "Slanda, I know it's not fair," she continued quickly, "but seeing those pictures, seeing how perfect you looked with women like that, it made me realize how out of place I am in your life." "You want to know about those women?" Jason asked quietly. Slanda nodded, though she looked like she was bracing for pain. "Their names were Catherine, Elena, and Victoria," Jason said. "Catherine was a fellow philanthropist I dated for 6 months. She was intelligent and accomplished and completely wrong for me. Elena was a doctor I met at a hospital fundraiser. Victoria was the daughter of a family friend. We dated because our parents thought we'd make a good match." "They sound perfect for you," Slanda said, her voice tight. "They were perfect on paper," Jason agreed. "But none of them ever made me feel anything real. I could have married any of them and lived a perfectly acceptable, completely empty life." "What changed?" Jason was quiet for a long moment, then stood up and walked to where he'd left his jacket. From the inner pocket, he pulled out a worn leather journal, holding it carefully like it was precious. "This changed everything," he said, sitting back down beside her. 10 years ago, I started writing in this journal. I want to show you something." With trembling hands, Jason opened the journal to the first page. In his careful handwriting, Slanda could see the date, exactly 10 years ago, and below it, words that made her breath catch. "Today I met an angel who doesn't know she has wings. She was at the community center, braiding an elderly woman's hair while humming a lullaby. She has brown eyes like warm honey and hands made for gentle things. I don't know her name, but I think she might have just changed my life. Slanda stared at the page, then up at Jason. 10 years ago. You were 18, Jason said softly, volunteering at the community center with your mother. I was there for a meeting about a donation, but it was canceled. I was about to leave when I saw you. I don't remember seeing you there. I made sure you didn't see me, Jason admitted. I was 22, successful, wealthy, and suddenly completely intimidated by an 18-year-old girl who radiated more genuine goodness than I'd ever encountered. Jason turned pages, revealing more entries. June 15th. She sang to Mrs. Patterson during a thunderstorm. Her voice is like honey and hope. December 24th. She worked Christmas Eve so other volunteers could be with their families. She deserves someone who sees her sacrifices. March 8th. She brought her daughter to the center today. Watching them together made me fall in love with both of them. You've been watching me for 10 years, Slanda whispered, her voice filled with awe. Not watching, Jason corrected gently. Loving. From afar, from the shadows, from whatever distance I thought was appropriate, but loving you completely. He turned to one of the more recent entries. June 3rd. Today I finally talked to her. Storm, broken bus, and I got to be her rescue for once. Sitting in that car with them, watching Amelia fall asleep, seeing Slanda's guard drop just slightly. It was the best day of my life. Slanda was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face as she listened to Jason read about their first meeting from his perspective. When you researched me online and found those pictures, Jason continued, you saw what you thought was my real life. But this is my real life. He gestured to the journal. 10 years of loving you. 10 years of hoping someday I'd be brave enough to tell you. Why didn't you approach me sooner? Slanda asked through her tears. Because you deserved more than just another wealthy man offering money, Jason replied. You deserved someone who understood that love isn't about what you can buy for someone, but about what you're willing to give of yourself. Jason pulled out a worn photograph from between the journal's pages, a picture of Slanda at 18, volunteering at the community center, her face radiant with youth and kindness. I've carried this for 10 years, he said quietly. Not like some obsession, but like a prayer. You've been my North Star, Slanda. Every decision I made, every charity I funded, every way I tried to be a better man. It was all because loving you made me want to be worthy of someone so beautiful, inside and out. Slanda took the photograph with shaking hands. I can't believe you kept this. I memorized everything about you, Jason said, his voice breaking slightly. The way you tuck your hair behind your ear when you're thinking, the way you hum your mother's lullaby when you're working. I know you prefer sunflowers because they're happier flowers. I know you check on Amelia 3 times every night before you can sleep. How could you know all that? Because I've been in love with you for 10 years, Jason said simply. Because I've spent a decade trying to understand everything about the woman who captured my heart with her kindness. Slanda closed the journal carefully, holding it like the precious thing it was. Jason, I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, he replied. I just needed you to understand that this isn't temporary for me. This is 10 years of loving you, 10 years of believing you're the most extraordinary person I've ever known. But all those women were distractions, Jason said firmly. Attempts to convince myself I could love someone else, but none of them were you. None of them had your heart, your strength, your incredible capacity for love. Slanda was quiet for a long moment, processing everything she'd learned. You've loved me for 10 years, she said finally. I'll love you for 10,000 more if you'll let me. And you never said anything because you were 18 when I first saw you, and I was 22 with enough money to be dangerous. Because you deserve to live your life, make your own choices. Because I was terrified that my feelings were too intense. And now, Jason met her eyes, his own blazing with sincerity. Now I'm still terrified that my feelings are too intense, but I'm more terrified of living the rest of my life without you knowing how much I love you. Slanda reached out and touched his face gently. You look like you haven't slept in days. I haven't, he admitted. I've been too worried about you and Amelia. Jason, Slanda said, her voice breaking with emotion. I am so sorry for not believing you, for not trusting what you were telling me, for letting fear convince me that something this beautiful couldn't be real. You don't have anything to apologize for, Jason said immediately. You were protecting yourself and Amelia the only way you knew how. But I hurt you. I hurt the man who has loved me for 10 years. You were worth the hurt, Jason said simply. You're worth everything. Slanda looked at this man who had loved her from afar for a decade, who had documented her life like it mattered, who had spent years trying to become worthy of her when she'd never felt worthy of much at all. I love you too, she whispered. Jason's breath caught. What? I love you too, Slanda said more clearly. I think I've been falling in love with you since that day in the storm, but I was too scared to admit it. Slanda, I love how gentle you are with Amelia. I love how you remember everyone's stories at the community center. I love how you've never once made me feel like I needed to be different to deserve your attention. Jason's eyes filled with tears. You love me? I love you, Slanda confirmed. I love your journal and your 10 years of patience. I love that you see me as someone worth loving. I love that you never gave up, even when I was too afraid to believe. Jason reached for her then, pulling her into his arms with a desperation that spoke of 10 years of waiting, weeks of separation, and the overwhelming relief of finally being able to hold the woman he loved. I love you so much, he whispered against her hair. I have loved you for so long. I'm sorry it took me so long to catch up, Slanda replied, holding him just as tightly. They held each other on that small couch in her tiny apartment, surrounded by the evidence of their very different lives, but united by a love that had been 10 years in the making. And for the first time in either of their lives, they both felt completely, perfectly home. Chapter 9. Breaking Barriers. The morning light filtering through Slanda's apartment windows felt different, warmer, more hopeful. Jason had spent the night on her couch, and she'd woken several times just to make sure he was really there, that the previous evening's revelations hadn't been some elaborate dream. Now, as she quietly made coffee, Slanda watched Jason sleep and tried to process everything that had changed. This man had loved her for 10 years. 10 years of watching, waiting, hoping, and believing in something she'd never even dared to imagine. Mama, Amelia's sleepy voice came from behind her. Is Mr. Jason still here? Yes, baby, Slanda said softly. He slept on our couch last night. Good, Amelia said with 6-year-old certainty. I like when he's here. The apartment feels happier. When Jason woke, it was to the sound of Amelia's giggling and the smell of bacon cooking. For a moment, he lay still, allowing himself to believe that this was his life, waking up to the sounds of the two people he loved most. Good morning, Slanda said when she noticed he was awake. Her voice was soft, uncertain, like she wasn't quite sure how to navigate this new territory. Good morning, Jason replied, sitting up and running a hand through his disheveled hair. Actually, Slanda interrupted, setting a cup of coffee in front of him. I called in for both of us. I told Martha we needed a personal day to work through some things. Mr. Jason, Amelia said, climbing up beside him, Mama made your coffee the way you like it, with 2 sugars and cream. Jason looked at Slanda in surprise. How did you know how I take my coffee? I pay attention too, Slanda said quietly, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. Maybe not for 10 years, but I've been watching you for the past few months. They spent the morning talking, really talking, for the first time without walls or fears between them. Jason told her about his lonely childhood, his struggle to find meaning in wealth. Slanda shared her fears about being abandoned, her guilt over sometimes resenting single motherhood, her dreams for Amelia's future. I want to show you something, Slanda said around noon, disappearing into her bedroom and returning with a small wooden box. Letters I wrote but never sent, Slanda admitted, opening the box to reveal dozens of folded papers. I started writing them about a month after I started working at the foundation. She pulled out one of the letters, unfolding it carefully. Dear Jason, I don't know why I'm writing this, since I'll never have the courage to give it to you. But working with you these past few weeks has been confusing. You're nothing like what I expected. You're kind and genuine, and you treat everyone like they matter, including me. I catch myself wondering what it would be like if someone like you could actually care about someone like me. But that's impossible, isn't it? Still, I wanted to write it down, just once, that you make me believe in goodness again. Forever grateful, Slanda. Jason's hands trembled as he read, You wrote to me. Dozens of times, Slanda admitted. Whenever I was confused or scared, writing to you helped me understand what I was feeling. Jason pulled out another letter, this one more recent. Dear Jason, I know I've been pulling away from you, and I know you're hurt. I wish I could explain that it's not because I don't care about you, it's because I care too much. Loving you terrifies me, but I've been abandoned before, and I don't think I could survive it if you decided I wasn't enough. So I'm pushing you away before you can leave me. I'm sorry for being afraid of something beautiful. Always yours, even when I can't say it. Slanda. You were never not enough, Jason said fiercely, taking her hands in his. Slanda, you have always been more than enough. You've been everything. I know that now, she said softly. Reading your journal, seeing how long you've loved me. It made me realize that maybe I am worth waiting for. You're worth everything, Jason said, then paused, looking uncertain. Slanda, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Okay, are you ready for this? Really ready, Jason asked. Because I can't go through losing you again. If we do this, if we try to build something real together, I need to know you're not going to run when things get complicated. Slanda was quiet for a long moment, considering seriously. A month ago, I would have said no. A week ago, I would have said no. But Jason, watching you love me and Amelia even when I was pushing you away, seeing how you never gave up, you've shown me what real love looks like, and I don't want to run from that anymore. What if people talk? What if your father comes back? Then we face it together, Slanda said with growing confidence. I'm tired of letting fear make my decisions. Jason studied her face, looking for any sign of uncertainty. And Amelia? How do you think she'll feel about me being a more permanent part of her life? As if summoned, Amelia appeared from the kitchen where she'd been coloring. Are you going to be my daddy now? She asked Jason with characteristic directness. Jason's heart stopped. Amelia, that's a big question. I know, she said seriously, but I've been thinking about it. Sarah at school has a daddy who wasn't her first daddy, and she says he's the best daddy ever because he chose to love her. You already love me like a daddy does, Amelia continued, climbing onto the couch between them. You worry about me when I'm sick, and you tell me stories, and you make Mama happy. And you smell safe, remember? Jason's eyes filled with tears. I do love you like you're my own daughter. I have for a long time. Then why can't you be my daddy? You can marry Mama and then we'll all be a real family. What do you think about that idea? Jason asked Slanda, his voice carefully controlled. I think, Slanda said slowly, that maybe Amelia is smarter than both of us. Maybe the answer really is that simple. Simple? We love each other. You love Amelia, she loves you. We're already a family in every way that matters. Maybe it's time to make it official. Jason's breath caught. Slanda, are you saying... I'm saying that I've spent the last 10 years protecting myself from hurt, and you've spent the last 10 years proving that not everyone leaves. I'm saying that I'm ready to stop being afraid and start being happy. Are you sure? Instead of answering with words, Slanda leaned over and kissed him. It was soft and sweet and full of promise, and when they broke apart, both of them were crying. Is that a yes? Jason whispered. That's a yes to everything, Slanda replied. Yes to loving you. Yes to building a life together. Yes to letting you be Amelia's father. Yes to believing in us. Yes to marrying me? Slanda's breath caught. Are you asking? Jason looked around the small apartment, at Amelia watching them with delighted interest, at the evidence of their simple but love-filled life, at the woman who had been his heart for 10 years. Then he slid off the couch and onto one knee. Slanda Peter, he said, his voice shaking with emotion, I have loved you for 10 years, and I want to love you for 10,000 more. I want to wake up every morning to the sound of you and Amelia laughing. I want to be the man you both come to when you need comfort or support. I want to be Amelia's father in every way that matters, and I want to be your husband, your partner, your best friend, and your greatest love. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. I've been carrying this for 3 months, hoping for the courage to ask and the chance to prove I was worthy of your answer. Inside the box was a ring that was perfect in its simplicity, a classic solitaire that would complement Slanda's graceful hands without overwhelming them. Slanda Peter, will you marry me? Will you let me love you and Amelia for the rest of my life? Will you be my family? Slanda looked at Jason, this man who had waited 10 years for this moment, who had loved her through her fears and walls and absolute terror of being vulnerable. She looked at Amelia, who was bouncing with excitement. She looked at the ring that represented not just a proposal, but a promise of forever. Yes, she whispered, then louder. Yes, Jason glowered, I will marry you. We will be your family, and you will be ours. As Jason slipped the ring onto her finger with shaking hands, Amelia cheered loudly enough for the neighbors to hear. We're getting married, she announced to no one in particular. Mr. Jason is going to be my daddy and Mama's husband, and we're going to be the happiest family ever. Jason stood and wrapped both Slanda and Amelia in his arms, holding his family, his real, chosen, forever family, as tightly as he could. I love you both so much, he whispered. We love you too, Daddy, Amelia said, trying out the word and giggling when it made Jason cry harder. As they stood there in that small apartment, surrounded by the evidence of a life built on love rather than money, all three of them understood that they had found something more precious than any treasure. They had found each other. And this time, no one was going anywhere. Chapter 10. Forever begins now. Present day, the wedding day. The morning sun streamed through the windows of the bridal suite at the chapel Jason had built on the community center grounds, casting everything in golden light. Slanda stood before the mirror in her flowing ivory dress, her hands trembling not with fear, but with overwhelming joy. Mama, you're glowing, Amelia said from beside her, adjusting the delicate veil that had belonged to Slanda's mother. At 8 years old, Amelia had grown into a confident, joyful child who referred to Jason as Daddy, like he'd always been part of their lives. That's because I'm happy, baby girl, Slanda replied, smoothing down her daughter's pale yellow flower girl dress. Happier than I ever thought possible. Daddy's probably crying already. Amelia observed with 8-year-old wisdom. He cried yesterday at rehearsal, and he cried this morning when he saw the flowers. Slanda laughed, the sound bright and musical. In the years since Jason's proposal, she'd watched him cry happy tears more often than she'd seen some people smile. Every milestone, every small moment seemed to overwhelm him with gratitude. Martha, the community center director, knocked softly on the door. "There's something here for you, dear," she said, entering with sunflowers and a note. Slanda's heart skipped as she recognized Jason's handwriting. "My beloved, today I marry my past, my present, and my future. You are every prayer I never knew how to pray. 10 years ago, I fell in love with your kindness. Today, I promise to spend my life being worthy of your heart. Forever yours, Jason." "He's so romantic," Amelia sighed dramatically. "Sarah's mom says Daddy should write greeting cards." "Sarah's mom is right," Slanda agreed, pressing the note to her heart. Meanwhile, in the groom's suite, Jason was crying as he struggled with his bow tie. His hands were shaking so badly that his best man, Marcus, had to help. "You need to breathe, man," Marcus said with fond exasperation. "You're marrying the woman you've loved for 11 years. "I can't believe this is real," Jason replied, his voice thick with emotion. "It's real," Marcus assured him, straightening Jason's tie. "And in 30 minutes, you're going to marry the most amazing woman in the world." Jason touched the worn leather journal in his jacket pocket, the same journal he'd been writing in for 11 years, now filled with entries about engagement and wedding planning, and the overwhelming joy of being part of Slanda and Amelia's daily life. The chapel was a masterpiece of simple elegance, built from warm stone with soaring windows. Live butterflies had been released that morning as a surprise for Amelia, and they fluttered through the air like living confetti. As guests arrived, the chapel filled with people who represented their combined lives. Business associates sat next to elderly residents from the community center. Amelia's teachers mingled with foundation board members. Mrs. Patterson, now 94, held court in the front row, telling anyone who would listen about watching young Jason moon over our Slanda for years. The processional began with the elderly residents walking slowly down the aisle to take their honored seats. These were the people who had first witnessed Jason's love for Slanda, and they were beaming with pride. Next came Amelia, practically skipping down the aisle in her yellow dress, scattering sunflower petals with serious concentration. When she reached the altar, she couldn't resist giving Jason a little wave that made him laugh through his tears. The music swelled as the doors opened for Slanda's entrance. Jason's breath caught as she appeared, walking alone by choice, strong and independent as always, but no longer afraid to be vulnerable. She had chosen to walk herself down the aisle as a symbol of the strength she'd found in learning to trust love. Her smile nearly brought Jason to his knees. Radiant, joyful, absolutely luminous with happiness, she looked like a woman who had finally come home. Her eyes never left his as she walked toward him, and Jason felt 11 years of love, longing, and patient waiting culminate in this single perfect moment. When she reached the altar, Jason stepped forward to meet her, taking her hands in his with fingers that trembled with emotion. "You're beautiful," he whispered, his voice rough with feeling. "So are you," Slanda replied, squeezing his hands, inside and out. Pastor Williams smiled at the assembled guests. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness something truly extraordinary. Not just the union of two people, but the celebration of a love that has grown and strengthened through time, through trial, and through the courage to believe in something beautiful." As they exchanged vows, there wasn't a dry eye in the chapel. Jason spoke first, his voice steady despite his tears. "Slanda, 11 years ago, I fell in love with a young woman who was braiding an elderly lady's hair while humming a lullaby. I fell in love with your kindness, your strength, your generous heart. I've loved you through seasons of watching from afar, through the joy of finally knowing you, through the pain of almost losing you, and through the incredible blessing of building a life together." He paused to look at Amelia, who was beaming. "I promise to love you and Amelia with everything I have for all the days of my life. I promise to be the father she deserves and the husband you need. I promise to see you, really see you every day, and to never take for granted the miracle of being loved by you." Slanda's vows were equally powerful. "Jason, you saw me when I was invisible, valued me when I felt worthless, waited for me when I needed to find myself, and loved me when I forgot how to love myself. You taught me that some people really do stay, that love doesn't always come with conditions, and that I am worthy of being cherished." She looked at their joined hands, then back into his eyes. "I promise to trust your heart, to believe in your love even when fear whispers lies. I promise to be your partner in building something beautiful together, not just for us, but for everyone whose lives we can touch. Today I choose to build a future where love isn't something to fear, but something to celebrate." When Pastor Williams pronounced them husband and wife, Jason cupped Slanda's face in his hands and kissed her with 11 years of love behind it. The kiss was soft, reverent, full of promises and dreams and the overwhelming joy of two hearts finally beating in perfect synchrony. When they broke apart, Amelia cheered loudly. "They did it! They're married. We're a real family now," making everyone laugh through their tears. The reception in the community center garden was perfect. Long tables under string lights, comfort food from local restaurants, and cake from the same bakery that had made Mrs. Patterson's birthday cake. But it was Jason's surprise that truly captured the spirit of their love. "Before we dance," Jason announced, "I want to share something with all of you. When I first fell in love with Slanda, I watched her love and care for the residents of this community center with such grace. Today, I want to honor that by announcing the establishment of the Slanda Cloward Foundation for Community Care." He turned to his stunned bride. "This foundation will provide support for single mothers, funding for community centers, and resources for elderly care programs. It will be run by someone who understands what it means to serve others. My wife." Slanda gasped, tears streaming down her face. "Jason, you can't just—" "I can and I did," he said with a grin, spinning her around as she laughed with pure joy. "You taught me that the greatest wealth is love shared. Now we can share it together." As the evening continued, Jason had all the elderly residents share their favorite memories of Slanda's kindness. Mrs. Patterson told everyone how Slanda had once sung her to sleep during a thunderstorm, and how young Jason here used to watch her like she hung the moon. "I told him years ago that our Slanda was special," Mrs. Patterson concluded with a grin. "I just didn't expect it to take him so long to work up the courage." The laughter that followed was warm and genuine. As the sun began to set, Jason and Slanda took the dance floor for their first dance as husband and wife. The song was the same one that had been playing in the coffee shop during their first real conversation, a soft jazz melody that had become their song. "Was it worth the wait?" Jason whispered as they swayed together. Slanda looked into his eyes, those warm, honest, completely devoted eyes that had been loving her for 11 years. Then at Amelia dancing nearby, then back at the man who had loved her across time and through every obstacle. "Every day of pain led me to this moment with you," she said softly. "Every tear, every struggle, every lonely night. It was all worth it to find a love this true." "Every day of waiting led me to you," Jason replied. "Every year of loving you from afar, every moment of hoping. It was all leading to this." As the evening wound down, they found themselves dancing under the string lights with Amelia sleeping peacefully in Jason's arms. She had danced herself into exhaustion, secure in the knowledge that her family was complete. As if summoned by their happiness, a monarch butterfly landed gently on Amelia's shoulder, its wings catching the light. It stayed for a long moment before fluttering away into the gathering dusk. "Even the butterflies approve," Slanda laughed softly. Jason looked around at their guests, business associates chatting with elderly residents, foundation board members laughing with community center staff, children playing while their parents shared stories. It was exactly what he dreamed of. Not a formal society wedding, but a celebration of love and community and chosen family. "Thank you," he said suddenly. "For what?" "For letting me love you, for loving me back, for giving me this family, this life, this happiness I never thought I deserved." "You deserve everything beautiful in this world," Slanda said fiercely. As they walked through the butterfly garden where Jason had first watched Slanda volunteer all those years ago, the space felt magical and full of promise. "Are we really married?" Slanda asked, looking at the ring on her finger. "We're really married," Jason confirmed. "You're really my wife. Amelia's really my daughter. We're really a family. Forever?" "Forever and always," Jason promised. "Through whatever comes, through ordinary days and extraordinary ones. Forever and always." Standing there in the garden where their love story had begun, Jason whispered the words he'd written in his very first journal entry. "Today I met an angel who doesn't know she has wings. Someday I'll tell her how beautiful she looks when she flies." "What did you say?" Slanda asked softly. "Just that you're beautiful when you fly," Jason replied, "and that I love watching you soar." They walked toward their family SUV and toward the life they were building together. A life that honored both of their journeys and created something entirely new and beautiful. As they drove home to the house they'd bought together, not Jason's mansion, but a comfortable family home with a garden for Amelia and a room for Jason's journal collection, Slanda reflected on the incredible journey that had brought them to this moment. 11 years ago, she'd been an 18-year-old girl braiding an elderly woman's hair, unaware that she was being seen and loved by someone who would wait patiently for over a decade. Tonight, she was a wife, a mother, a foundation director, a woman who had learned to believe in her own worth and in the possibility of lasting love. "Penny for your thoughts, Mrs. Cloward," Jason said softly, taking her hand. "Mrs. Cloward," Slanda repeated, testing the name. "I like the sound of that." "Good," Jason said, bringing her hand to his lips. "Because you'll be hearing it for the next 60 or 70 years." As they carried their sleeping daughter into their home, their real, chosen, forever home, both understood that they had found something more precious than any treasure. They had found each other, and they had created a love story that would last for all time. In this moment, in the present, surrounded by the life they'd built together and the love they'd chosen to believe in, they were complete. And this was only the beginning.